Hey, welcome to Disarming Out of Control Emotions. Emotions getting out of control are one of the biggest sources of mom guilt that I can imagine. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I am Cove. If you don't know me, I don't normally sound quite like this. I've been sneezing all morning, but I just feel like that means that God is going to show up powerfully for someone that watches this live or watches the replay today. Um, so, um, that if you don't know me, I am a life coach. I am trained in childhood emotional neglect recovery and different types of prayer. And today I'm on Zoom, and I'm also recording, going live from my phone because Zoom and Facebook weren't cooperating. So as we go through the exercise, if you would like to talk to me and kind of work through the exercise with me, you can jump on Zoom. The link is in the event for today, and a couple different posts there. But before we get started, before we dive in, I'm going to pray. So Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for each woman who is here live, for each woman who will watch the replay. I truly believe that you're going to show up for them when they choose to step in and engage with what you've laid on my heart to bring today. And I just protect and ask you to protect their space as they listen and as they take the risk to open up to emotions. They're maybe not used to that. And yeah, I just know it'll be good. I ask you to speak through me today, help me keep my thoughts clear. And yeah, I'm excited for what you're going to do today. Thank you for using me and partnering with me. Amen. Hi, Vanny. So today we're talking about disarming out of control emotions because, like I said, as moms, out of control emotions are probably one of the hardest things to deal with. We can get so much shame and just so many other things from sorry, trying to do two things at once. So why? Well, before I get into any more of that, I want you to give yourself permission to be curious and gracious to yourself today. Because, like I said, out of control emotions is one of the biggest sources of shame and frustration for moms. So we're not partnering with any of that today. There's no condemnation, no judgment. Just give yourself permission to be curious about what was going on and to be gracious with yourself. Hey, Jennifer. If you want to join me on Zoom, the link is in the event for today. You couldn't get Zoom to work. Zoom isn't cooperating for me either. So maybe I'll just shut it down. But I'm doing it on my phone, and it is giving me the option to bring people on camera. So I don't know if I'll be able to figure that out or not. We'll see how it goes. So, hi Dee. So first of all, just take that moment to give myself permission to be curious and generous and gracious with myself today. And you actually don't want to do any teaching. I want to do the exercise and then come back and talk about it. Because in that place of curiosity, what I want you to do is to think of a time when you felt like your emotions were out of control as a mom. And we're not going to look at the aftermath of that. We're not going to look at the shame and the guilt and all of that stuff that that came after the emotions were out of control. We're going to be curious about what happened before and during. And a lot of times we look at the before and like, well, my kids were being annoying, they weren't listening to me. But we want to look inside and be curious. What's going on? What was going on inside of you? What were the messages? What were the emotions? So we're going to start there. So first of all, you're going to start with thinking of a time and make a note at the top of your worksheet or on your notebook or whatever, or in your phone, of which time you're thinking of where you were experiencing out of control emotions as a mom. And I'm going to have some tea. Okay, so from that time of your emotions, or your emotions being out of control, write down as many emotions as you can think of. Frustration, rejection were always two huge ones for me. But just be curious. What else comes up when you look back at that? We're not going back into it. We're just being curious and looking at it from here and going, yeah, what were those emotions that we're trying so hard to get out?
Mom,
what, sweetie?
can you please put my have for watching?
Is it not working again?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can have fun watching.
We already talked about that I wasn't going to be able to come help you and that you had lots of other choices, remember? Yeah, out of control emotions doesn't have to be exploding. I often exploded. My mom was an exploder too, so I probably just learned that. I often exploded. I often imploded too, like out of control emotions on myself. And sometimes out of control emotions just shutting down because we can't control the emotions. Like the only thing we can do is just shut down. So it doesn't have to look like exploding and raging at your kids to be out of control emotions. It can be shutting down. It can be beating yourself up. Just overreacting to things. Small inconveniences, kids being kids. And instead of being like, yeah, that's part of life, I should expect this. Instead, there's this overreaction. And like I said, one of my big ones was rejection. It wasn't always anger. Like I would feel rejected way more than was reality for my situation. And then you take the time, and I guess I could go fix her show. While you do this, I'm going to give you some time to, what was the what were the messages that those emotions were giving you? And again, just be curious. You're not judging them. You're not seeing if they make sense. You're just looking, okay, this emotion of rejection came up to me. What message was it giving me? What kind of things, what kind of thoughts and stuff was coming up with that emotion of rejection, or whatever yours are? And I'm going to give you, if you have a hard time identifying emotions, it can be as simple as angry, hurt, sad, happy. I'm trying to think. Some groups have 6, some have 8. I think disgust is one. So just like, it really is effective even to be that, like, I am hurt, I am mad, I am sad.
Mom?
It can be that simple. And I will be right back. I can come fix it right now, sweetie.
Like, I'm watching you? Yeah. Make sure
Okay, I'm back. How is it going? Hi, Kimberly. So we are thinking of a time that our emotions felt out of control, and that could be raging at our kids, but it also could be shutting down. It could be overreacting to like just a normal thing. It could be beating ourselves up, like turning that anger and frustration inward. It can look different ways, but just where your emotions felt out of control. So think of a time that your emotions felt out of control, and we don't want to look today at the aftermath of like after you realize your emotions are out of control and what happened after that. Just looking at what went on leading up to that, and not necessarily like you need to think of the circumstances, but paying attention to what was going on inside of you. What kinds of emotions were you having, and then the messages that go with those. What kinds of things were you thinking? Um, and I should have written down a recent example, but what's coming to mind um, is when, I don't know, there was one morning last week or a couple weeks ago, we needed to be out of the house like first thing in the morning, and Tegan was not cooperating. She wasn't staying focused. She wasn't doing what I asked her to do. And I have recently implemented that she needs to pay me a toy if she is disobeying, because it's the only thing she cares about. Um, when when she wants to do what she wants to do, that's the only thing she cares about. Let me say it that way, because she's very sweet and very engaging. But let's see, Kimberly, does this mean you disconnect from your emotions, or that you're easily able to regulate them? Okay, you're responding to D. And Dee was saying that she has a hard time connecting with her emotions, and that she just kind of turns them off. So, yeah, if you can identify what they were so that you turned them off, or why do you turn them off, that might be a more helpful place for you to start. So I could feel, I had told Tegan that I was going to take a toy. It was costing her a toy for how she was not listening, and she didn't like that, so started meltdown, and I could feel the anger rising up in me of, I don't know, like you're defying me and you're not listening and you're just being difficult. And knowing that in the past, because she has a very similar personality to my second son, in many ways doesn't see that she's not my equal and shouldn't have just as much say as I do in everything. And so I could feel that rising up, and I'm like, well, she's not responding well, so that'd be another toy. And that's what I did to him, and it would escalate to horrible proportions and just be miserable for both of us. Yelling and screaming, hitting, and it was awful. Really awful with him for his young years. I say I went through his teenage years like by the time he was 8, and I'm thankful for that, because said if I had gone through his teenage years as a teenager, I wouldn't have made it. But so I could feel those emotions rising to where they had gotten out of control in the past, and instead be able to go, no, she's not defying me. She's upset because she doesn't want to lose a toy. And so she's being emotional, which means she's not being rational. And so it's not going to do any good for me to try and talk to her or explain things. It just simply needs to be the consequence, and we need to move on. where in the past, like I said, it would have just continued to escalate. And so looking at those messages of why is that rising up in me? Well, because I'm feeling disrespected. Because I think it really comes down to feeling disrespected. Like, I'm the mom and you're supposed to do what I say. And also, like, unappreciated because, like, you're making this hard for me. Which, like, what kind of victim statement is that? But I thought it a lot. Like, just feeling a victim to my kids. Like, why are you making this so hard for me? Well, they're not trying to make it hard for me. She's just having a bad day and she doesn't understand time. She's 4. And whatever the things that my son and I thought about, like, again, for his age, like, he was not trying to make life difficult for me. But I raised him to believe that he was, unfortunately. So we work on that now that he's 20. So D says, no, much to react to, I guess. Seems like most things aren't worth getting upset over. Yeah, if you can truly just be like, choosing, I'm not going to get upset about this, that's really good. If it's shutting down that I am upset, but I don't believe that I have permission or space to be upset, so I'm going to shut it down, that's different. So, yeah, you want to be able to lost my train of thought. I was going to just close Zoom since it's not working anyway, so I will do that. So yeah, are you choosing a different emotion and a different response, or are you shutting it down because you don't believe that there's space for it, or you don't believe it's valuable? Makes a big difference. So, I don't know, with all my talking, if you've been able to work on the homework or not. If you have, you can comment. So we're just looking at a time that your emotions were out of control. What were your emotions going on or leading up to the point where you're like, they're out of control? And we're not looking at the after yet, just at the leading up to that. Okay, D says, sometimes I shut down because my husband doesn't approve of my corrections. Yeah, so that's again, it depends on if you're shutting down or if you're going, okay, this isn't the appropriate time or place, so I'm going to take it somewhere else. If it's I don't matter and there's not space for me to show up here, then that is hurtful and definitely challenging. So I'm just going to give you a few more minutes to, if there's any messages or emotions that you want to share. I'm bummed that Zoom didn't work. I was super excited to do that. Wasn't working this morning either. Kimberly says, usually when I'm losing my stuff, it's because I feel like no one is listening and because my physical space is out of order. I feel out of control. I can't read your whole thing, so I was going to try and find it on Facebook, or on my computer, but it's not looking like it's going to work, so try again. Usually not getting my way. I'm upset with myself because of lack of routine. Yeah, that's my stuff usually turned back in on me. Like, I could have avoided this if I had planned better, if I'd followed the schedule, if I'd stopped working when I was supposed to, those kinds of things. But if we're not in tune with that, then yeah, it ends up coming out and spilling onto them. And so digging into that, I feel like no one is listening. Is that hurtful? Is it make you angry? And again, realizing, oh, I'm hurt and angry because no one's listening, so what can I do about that? And if your physical space that, what can you do about that? So that it stops sending you those messages that are really not helpful. I think you did internalize it as disrespect, yeah. I did too. I heard a teaching, I cannot remember now who was doing it, a psychologist. He was talking to another psychologist, and the one shared that he was in his room in his home office working, and the kids burst in the middle of recording a video, and so he felt so disrespected. And the guy he was interviewing or whatever challenged him and was like, you interpreted it as disrespect, but why did they burst in? And the dad was like, well, I don't really know. It's like, okay, so then you can't say it's disrespect, because if they burst in, for one, did they know you were recording? So they didn't intentionally burst in to ruin your recording. And then they burst in because there was something really excited that they couldn't wait to share with you, and they were actually honoring you from their perspective, but you're choosing to feel disrespect. And so that has really challenged me to stop and go and to see the power of how we interpret things. Let's see. They aren't respecting the routines and the rules, especially when they have had a say in creating them. Oh, yeah. So that can feel more frustrating. Like, I went through this work to include you. I went to this work to get your input, and you're still not listening. Yeah, so good time to back and reevaluate and express that of like, this is like, I gave you guys input and I asked how you wanted things to be because I wanted things to go better, and that's not working. So where do we fix it? Where are we going wrong here? Your 13-year-old has learned to come and say, I didn't intend to be disrespectful, which is valid. As long as, they're not being manipulative, it's valid. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. And it's an opportunity to say, okay, maybe you didn't mean to, but can you see how it was? Can you, learn from this? How can you do it differently? Because I appreciate that you weren't intending to be disrespectful, but can you, especially with my one son, it's just kind of like he sees the world his way and has a harder time seeing it from somebody else's point of view. And so it's just kind of like, well, I didn't mean it to be disrespectful, so there shouldn't be a problem. And, going, no, but here's where the relationship comes in, where you get to know me well enough that it matters to you that I felt disrespected, even if you think I shouldn't have. And we can go relationship from there. Jennifer says, my kids are disappointed over not getting what they want and stuck in that emotion, so I feel frustrated and helpless. Thought is, I don't know how to help you. Figure it out. Move on. Yeah. So being able to empathize and hold space for their disappointment and allow them to feel disappointed and not have to fix it. And that is a hard place to learn to hold space for, and I struggle with that even, with Tegan coming in here on Monday and melting down because her video is not working. Like, okay, you're disappointed, but get over it. There's 50 other things to do, and learning to hold that space of like, okay, so like, what would that be like for me to have, like, what would it be in my life that would be like the video not working, and how would I feel? And that, like, yeah, it's okay to be disappointed. That's really frustrating. Tell me what else. And as they express the emotions, because emotions need to be expressed, they need to be felt, and then they move on. So that's actually how to help them move on, is to give them the words and give them the space to say what they're feeling. And that sounds like way too simple, but that's actually what they need. And once they've got the emotion out of the way, because we can't be emotional and logical at the same time, so they're not going to think of a solution and think of what to do next while they're still emotional. So, like, Tegan coming back and being all disappointed, and me being like, yeah, you're disappointed, but go find something else. I wasn't really giving her the space to express that emotion so that she could think of something else. There was still way too much emotion there. Brianna says, daughter was using the broom and things looked messy. I thought, are you trying to help me? And she replied sweetly, yes. Try and read these without knocking my phone down. And okay, so you're seeing it as her doing something dangerous, and she sees it as trying to be helpful. Yeah, getting their perspective is super important. Yeah, and Kimberly being able to validate, like, okay, you weren't trying to be disrespectful, but I still felt disrespected, and that matters too. And then being able to work through that. So the reason, we'll get into this more tomorrow, but I kind of want to like where did these out of control emotions come from? And like for me, the feeling disrespected, and Kimberly had shared that too. Like, it's really all these other things that are going on, and it could be current things that are going on. Like, I'm behind on my to-do list, and my house is a mess, and things like that in the current that we're not paying attention to and not giving the space to really feel what we're feeling. And then something happens and our emotions feel out of control. But it can also be the times when we really overreact is often also stuff from a long time ago. And it really says so much of how we interpret, even with our filters, helps to look at the behavior as them having a problem versus them being a problem. Yes, because they are not their behavior any more than you are your behavior. And if we're raising emotionally healthy adults for the next generation, they need to know that they are not their behavior. They're two separate things. They're in charge of their behavior, but their worth and their value is not determined by their behavior. So we get to model that, and we get to teach them that. And so, yeah, a huge part of that is seeing them as making sure to understand, like, your behavior was the problem here, not your problem. But those are the things that, if we were taught that growing up, you made a mistake, you're bad, well, then that's why we have a hard time separating it now. And those messages, like, why would rejection be such a big button to me? Well, because I've felt abandoned my entire life. And that's not to blame anyone, but in my experience and my childlike thinking, I felt abandoned. And so if somebody's not accepting me and coming closer, then I easily feel rejected. And, if the disrespect, if you never felt heard growing up, if your opinion didn't matter, things like that, then disrespect might be a huge trigger now. Which is another one for me of like, my opinion didn't matter, my emotions didn't matter, my perspective didn't matter. And so it's just a form of disrespect. And being able to recognize that, okay, this current situation isn't near as big a thing. It's just that it feels so familiar to all these other things that haven't really been resolved because I've just been stuffing it for all these years. And so that's like where these out of control emotions come from. And I like to say God puts his finger on, he brings attention to what he is ready to work on. So instead of being frustrated that you have out of control emotions, take it as a opportunity that there's something here that he wants to heal, there's something here he wants to repair or restore. And so it's good news. It's exciting. He's got things he wants to work on, and he's ready to work on it because he's bringing it to the surface. Dee says, I guess our parenting was never discussed. When I was growing up, you did what your parents said, and you did it now. But my husband gives the kids the ability to discuss, ask questions, negotiate, which ticks me off. But I know they won't obey me without explanation, and my husband won't allow me to force them to obey without conversation. So, yeah, definitely a difference in parenting styles and just looking at what's the goal that you want for them and what kinds of things do they need to interact with you and what ways do they need to interact with you for them to be the kind of people that you want them to be when they grow up. Do you want them to know how to negotiate and stand up for themselves? Or do you want them to obey without question? And I think there's room for both. I did my best with my kids that it's obey without question until you have earned the right to question and have discussion. So it wasn't an either or, it was both. Like when you've proven that you honor me enough to just obey without question, because like we had times we worked on a farm, we were around dangerous stuff. Like there's times that you just need to obey without question because it matters. Like sometimes it's life and death. Other times it's just honor and convenience. But there are times to just obey without question. And we're training them for their relationship with the Lord. And there most definitely are times when we need to obey him without question. And so just teaching them that, like, no, sometimes you just need to do it. But also when you've honored me and showed me that you're willing to do that, then we can have discussion about why I'm doing things the way I'm doing and possibly taking suggestions to do things differently. No one jumps when I say jump, and it makes me feel unimportant. Yeah. Yeah, and you kind of have the two generations of kids like I do too, Dee. So you have the first ones that was like obey or get a spanking, and the second one that, yeah, you're different, and so it's different. And finding the ways to get that respect, because maybe they're not going to jump when you say jump, but to build the relation and the connection so that you don't feel unimportant and that they don't feel unimportant either, because I don't think that's what you want with your kids. Sorry for the sniffling today. So I think that's all I have for today. Remember that if you're here live, you have a chance to win a book, and I will do that afterwards. And then if you watch the video and comment that you're here live interacting with me or that you've watched the replay, and then post a pearl and do your homework, that there's an opportunity to win a one-on-one session each day. And then if you do all of the things by next Monday, there'll be a grand prize of 4 one-on-one sessions with me. Kimberly says, do first, or at least start taking action before asking me to consider something else, or say okay and then respectfully ask if I would consider. Yeah, that's a good strategy. And D, yes, it's good that they feel comfortable enough to talk things out with you. That's huge, because I grew up with the do as I say, and there was no discussion about anything ever. Sophia's parents divorced when she was 2, and dad's style and mom's style were different, and it was hard. Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna grab a drink. Yeah, we did, I think it was called the Young Peacemakers. It was kind of like a Sunday school curriculum, but we did it with a couple other families. And one of the, I think they called it a wise appeal. And so like it laid out a framework, a template basically, for the kids to be able to say, okay, Mom, I understand that this is what you want to do. Here's what I would, so not just saying okay, but like, yes, I understand you want me to go mow the lawn right now. I was wondering if I could finish my homework first and then go mow the lawn because I'm going to want to take a shower when I'm done and then, or whatever their reasons are. But to do that, like, gave them a template to say, yes, I hear you. I know what you're expecting from me, and here's my response. And like, it's just teaching them great communication skills. So that was a really powerful tool. And I think it was called the Young Peacemakers. And I think it also taught them, I think it was called a 5-star apology. And so rather than saying, I'm sorry, there was 4 points, excuse me, to include in an apology to say, I understand what you did. I see how it impacted you. It's been too long since I've done it, so I don't remember the 5, but giving them those kinds of tools so that they can help you feel more respected and more important. And it's also helping them feel more important because they're able to communicate more clearly and have more confidence and stuff like that. So homework for today is to share whatever emotion, whatever emotion from today's exercise surprised you the most or gave you the biggest insight. Let's see, Kimberly, often the request isn't unreasonable, it's just something you hadn't considered. Yeah, because I look at the world totally different than any of my kids. My oldest son and I probably see things most similar, but still, he sees things completely differently. And it's like, well, yeah, that's a fine way to do it. I just didn't think of it because I don't think that way. So, yeah, definitely giving them that space, and it helps you get to know them better too, of like, oh, that's how you look at the world. Okay, I can, and for me, I was homeschooling, so learning some of those things about like, oh, not having the clearly defined checklist is really frustrating and makes you feel disrespected. So if you're constantly feeling disrespected, then why are, like, I'm going to get that feedback from you and it's going to make things hard. So let's see, your dads were my way or the highway. Yeah, not being listened to makes me feel unimportant. Yeah, and I think, Dee, I think your kids are old enough that you could have that discussion with them to say, when, like, this happens, I don't feel that you're listening, and it makes me feel unimportant. And be able to have that conversation. I think you could do that with your kids. So thank you, ladies, for joining me, and really praying that this is helpful. And like I said, tomorrow we'll be diving into kind of those messages that come from way back and that we've tried to deal with and they just keep sticking around kind of stuff. So share a takeaway from today, something that was helpful in your homework. Share the emotion that surprised you the most, and yeah, just have a great day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.